Hello, my name is Mehak Birdi and today I'll be presenting a presentation on media bias. What is media bias? The term media bias itself implies a persuasive or widespread bias, contravening the standards of journalism rather than the perspective of an individual, journalist, or an article. Media bias uses a very persuasive tone to divert the mind and ideology of people. In many countries, media bias is heavily disputed. The most commonly discussed forms of bias occur when media support or attack a particular political party, candidate, or ideology. Limitations of media bias. The limitations to media bias neutrality include the inability of journalists to report all available stories and facts, the government influence over censorship, for example, in North Korea. Market forces also oppress the media, for example, ownership of the news channel, the selection of staff or the intended audience, and the pressure from the advertisers. History of media bias. Political bias has been a feature of mass media since its birth following the invention of printing press. Historians have found that publishers often served the interests of powerful social groups like the USSR during the Cold War. Like newspapers or broadcast media such as radio and television have been used as a mechanism for propaganda from their earliest days. In the 19th century, journalists began to recognize the concept of unbiased reporting as an integral part of journalist ethics. This coincided with the rise of journalism as a powerful social force. Even today, though the most recognized journalists cannot avoid the accusations of bias. History of media bias in the Cold War. One of the single worst examples of media bias can be seen in the Cold War. That was significant about the media bias was the media's refusal to accurately report the evils of Soviet Union. It did not matter how many millions of Soviet citizens that Joseph Stalin and his successors murdered, the media was not going to report it. The media had awarded itself a Pulitzer Prize through the lies of one Walter Duranty, a New York columnist. Types of media bias. There are four types of media bias. Advertising bias, which refers to stories that are slanted to please advertisers. Corporate bias, which refers to when stories are selected and slanted to please the corporate owners of media. Mainstream bias refers to the tendency to report what everyone else is reporting and to avoid stories that will offend anyone. The fourth and the last one is sensationalism. It is a type of editorial bias in mass media which events and topics in news stories and pieces are overhyped to increase viewership or readership numbers. Sensationalism may include reporting about generally insignificant matters and events that don't overall influence the society, as well as biased presentations of newsworthy topics in a sensationalist, trivial, or tabloid manner. Examples include coverage of Bill Clinton scandal, Cassie Anthony trial, Tonya Harding's role in the attack of Nancy Kerrigan, and the O.J. Simpson murder case. How can we avoid media bias? The media influences those people who are not invested enough in the current events to self-fact check our politicians, therefore creating a new and false reality. We hear politicians utterly completely new, untrue statements that go unchallenged by the media if they support that official, and we see the newspapers with political agendas of their own. Roundtable is a technique used to show representatives of opposing views on an issue, which allows diverse views to appear in the media. However, the person has to ask representative, non-prejudicial questions and not to edit their comments fairly, and choose people who really represent the breadth of opinion. If the report is altered, the counterpoint can be seen as a biased report. Second way is disclosure of affiliations is another technique that is considered as a conflict of interest. This can be seen when a news organization reports a story with some relevance to the news organization itself or the owners. Who coined the term? Noam Chomsky coined the term manufacturing consent, which refers to media bias. Abraham Noam Chomsky was born on December 7th, 1928, and is an American linguist, philosopher, and a scientist logician, the political commentator, and activist. He has worked at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology for most of his life, where he is currently a professor. He has written more than 100 books in his life and on various subjects. Chomsky's linguistic theory is based on the principles underlying the structure of language. He therefore argues that all humans share the same underlying linguistic structure, irrespective of their background. Chomsky came up with the 10 most common and effective strategies to establish manipulation of the population through the media, such as the strategy of distraction, going to the public as a little child, keeping the public in ignorance and mediocrity. Self-blame strengthened, where he lets individuals blame for their misfortune because of the failure of their intelligence, their abilities, or their efforts. So instead of rebelling against the economic system, the individual will feel guilty. Few quotes by Noam Chomsky which I really liked. If we don't believe in freedom of expression for people we despise, we don't believe it in at all. We do not contend that this is all mass media does, but we believe that propaganda function to be a very important aspect of their overall service. Examples of media bias. The first article which I found out was written towards Margaret Thatcher and her death. It was written by the CNN. The Conservative Party members and supporters said that Margaret Thatcher can transform Britain into a free market economy and restored a sense of British pride, whereas critics confirmed that Thatcher destroyed the British coal mining industry and paved its way for some of the current UK problems, such as reducing Britain's manufacturing waste. This went unnoticed by CNN as the report was clearly biased. The tone of the article is very positive towards Thatcher. The writer uses short and descriptive sentences to portray the success of Thatcher rather than acknowledging her failures. The second article which I found out was on Obama and Romney. It was written by the New York Times. It can be seen in the 2012 elections between Obama and Romney. The two parties had similar thinking, but due to media bias towards Obama, Obama won the elections. Both the parties supported Israel, declined on granting constitutional rights to terrorists, and maintaining gun control. Despite the fact that Romney did not win the elections, he has still won the respect in the hearts of many Americans. The tone of the article seems very negative towards Romney, and he uses assertion as a media bias technique, where the writer says that Romney told reporters that his rewards were not elegantly stated. Third article which I found out was on Miley Cyrus. It was written by Jessica Bennett. The strange irony to the fact that this article was published on the same week as a milestone achievement for women's suffrage, which resulted in women finally being able to vote. The headlines were dominated by pop star Miley Cyrus, who caught the eye of many people on this year's MTV Music Awards. Media has completely voted against her character ever since the video We Can't Stop came out. The girl, who used to be America's little darling, shocked the fans with a music video which was in contrast to her earlier self. The media criticized her music and her image. The tone of the article sounds very negatively biased towards her. The writer also used sharp words such as thongs for tweens directed towards Miley Cyrus.